This is Mrs. Giltz. If you're watching this recording, this is for help with the 3.04 written assignment. What you'll do is pick a resident from the annex other than Anne and write a journal entry from that person's perspective. So you'll use first person point of view, such as I, me, my, and you'll also try to use a tone that's realistic to that character. So if you know them to be kind of grumpy, maybe you want to keep a grumpy tone. So I do have a couple entries that you can pick from: Tuesday, July 13th, 1943, or Friday, October 29th, 1943. Or you can even pick a different journal entry from the book. That's up to you, but these ones have a lot going on, so it might be easier to take the different perspective from somebody else. So all you have to do is write one paragraph in that journal entry and then one more paragraph to show me a reflection. What was different between your journal entry versus Anne's diary? So that's why we need to pick someone other than Anne. So here is a list of our different characters in the annex. So obviously we can't pick Anne because we want a different entry from someone else's point of view. But you can pick her sister Margot, her mother Edith, her father Otto, Mr. or Mrs. Van Daan, Peter, or even Mr. Dussel. So again, we're doing a different point of view like we talked about in class on Monday. So we're looking at a different perspective. Put yourself in their shoes. What do you think they would say? So this is from Monday's class where we had an example where we tried to write Anne's excerpt here in Peter's perspective. So if we take a look at this, she wrote about Peter's birthday and what he got. And in class, here's an example of what we came up with. So we have, Dear Journal, yesterday was my birthday. So we're pretending that Peter was writing a journal entry. Like what do we think he would include? So he talked about, our example here, we wrote that maybe he would talk about having a lot of nice presents, and it was really great to still even celebrate his birthday, even though they were in hiding. And even though some of these gifts may be useless, it was still nice that they thought of me. So this gives us that perspective of how Peter would have thought about his birthday. We know that Anne wrote about it. This is his thoughts that we're guessing. We know that this isn't truly Peter's entry, but we're putting ourselves in his shoes and what we think he would have said. So with that, I do have those two passages here. I will read them aloud. So if you'd like to listen to them, you may. If you rather just skip ahead and pick a different passage, that's fine. You can skip ahead in the recording, but I'm going to read both of these passages to you so that way you have them and you can choose which one. This is passage 1, Tuesday, July 13th, 1943. Dear Kitty, yesterday afternoon, with Daddy's permission, I asked Dussel whether he would please be so good, being really very polite, as to allow me to use the little table in our room twice a week in the afternoons, from 4 o'clock till 5:30. I sit there every day from 2:30 till 4, while Dussel sleeps, but otherwise the room plus table are out of bounds. Inside, in our common room, there is much too much going on. It is impossible to work there, and besides, Daddy likes to sit at the writing table and work too sometimes. So it was quite a reasonable request, and the question was put very politely. Now honestly, what do you think the very learned Dussel replied? No. Just plain no. I was indignant and refused to be put off like that, so I asked him the reason for this. But I was sent away with a flea in my ear. This was the barrage which followed. I have to work too, and if I can't work in the afternoons, then there's no time left for me at all. I must finish my task, otherwise I've started it all for nothing. Anyway, you don't work seriously at anything. Your mythology. Now just what kind of work is that? Knitting and reading are not work either. I am at the table and shall stay there. My reply was, Mr. Dussel, I do work seriously, and there is nowhere else for me to work in the afternoons. I beg of you to kindly reconsider my request. With these words the offended Anne turned her back on the very learned doctor, ignoring him completely. I was seething with rage and thought Dussel frightfully rude, which he certainly was, and myself very friendly. In the evening, when I could get a hold of Pym, I told him how it had gone off and discussed what I should do next, because I was not going to give in, and preferred to clear it up myself. Pym told me how I ought to tackle the problem, but warned me that it would be better to leave it to the next day, as I was so het up. I let this advice go to the winds, and waited for Dussel after the dishes were done. Pym sat in the room next to us, which had a calming influence on me. I began. Mr. Dussel, I don't suppose you see any point in discussing the matter any more, but I must ask you to do so. Dussel then remarked with his sweetest smile, I am always and at all times prepared to discuss this matter, but it has already been settled. I went on talking, though continually interrupted by Dussel. When you first came here, we arranged that this room should be for both of us. If we were to divide it fairly, you would have the morning and I all the afternoon. But I don't even ask that much, and I think that my 2 afternoons are perfectly reasonable. At this Dussel jumped up as if someone had stuck a needle into him. You can't talk about your rights here at all, and where am I to go then? Shall I ask Mr. Van Daan whether he will build a little compartment in the attic? Then I can go and sit there. I simply can't work anywhere. With you one always gets trouble. If your sister Margot, who after all has more reason to ask such a thing, would have come to me with the same questions, I should not think of refusing. But you. Then followed the business about the mythology and the knitting, and Anne was insulted again. However, she did not show it and let Dussel finish speaking. But you. One simply can't talk to you. You are so outrageously selfish. As long as you can get what you want, you don't mind pushing everyone else to one side. I've never seen such a child. But after all, I shall be obliged to give you your own way, because otherwise I should be told later on that Anne Frank failed her exam because Mr. Dussel would not give up the table for her. It went on, and finally it was such a torrent I could hardly keep pace with it. At one moment I thought, in a minute I'll give him such a smack in the face that he'll fly up to the ceiling together with his lies. But the next moment I said to myself, keep calm. Such a fellow isn't worth getting worked up about. After giving final vent to his fury, Master Dussel left the room with an expression of mixed wrath and triumph, his coat stuffed with food. I dashed to Daddy and told him all that he had not already heard of the story. Pym decided to talk to Dussel the same evening, which he did. They talked for over half an hour. The theme of the conversation was something like this. First of all, they talked about whether Anne should sit at the table, yes or no. Daddy said that he and Dussel had already discussed the subject once before, when he had professed to agree with Dussel, in order to not put him in the wrong in front of the young. But Daddy had not thought it fair then. Dussel thought I should not speak as if he was an intruder who tried to monopolize everything. But Daddy stuck up for me firmly over that, because he had heard for himself that I had not breathed such a word of such a thing. To and fro it went, Daddy defending my selfishness and my trifling work, Dussel grumbling continually. Finally, Dussel had to give in after all, and I had the opportunity of working undisturbed until 5 o'clock for 2 afternoons a week. Dussel looked down his nose very much, didn't speak to me for 2 days, and still had to go and sit at the table from 5 till half past. Frightfully childish. A person of 54 who is still so pedantic and small-minded must be so by nature, and will never improve. Yours, Anne. All right, and here is passage number 2 as an option. Friday, October 29th, 1943. Dear Kitty, there had been resounding rows again between Mr. and Mrs. Van Daan. It came about like this. As I have already told you, the Van Daans are at the end of their money. One day, some time ago now, Koofus spoke about a furrier with whom he was on good terms. This gave Van Daan the idea of selling his wife's fur coat. It's a fur coat made from rabbit skins, and she has worn it for 17 years. He got 325 florins for it, an enormous sum. However, Mrs. Van Daan wanted to keep the money to buy new clothes after the war, and it took some doing before Mr. Van Daan made it clear to her that the money was urgently needed for the household. The yells and screams, stamping and abuse. You can't possibly imagine it. It was frightening. My family stood at the bottom of the stairs, holding their breath, ready if necessary to drag them apart. All this shouting and weeping and nervous tension are so unsettling and such a strain that in the evening I drop into my bed crying, thanking heaven that I sometimes have half an hour to myself. Mr. Kufus is away again. His stomach gives him no peace. He doesn't even know whether it has stopped bleeding yet. For the first time, he was very down when he told us that he didn't feel well and was going home. All goes well with me on the whole, except that I have no appetite. I keep being told, "You don't look at all well." I must say that they are doing their very best to keep me up to the mark. Grape sugar, cod liver oil, yeast tablets, and calcium have all been lined up. My nerves often get the better of me. It is especially on Sundays that I feel rotten. The atmosphere is so oppressive and sleepy and heavy as lead. You don't hear a single bird singing outside, and the deadly close silence hangs everywhere, catching hold of me as if it will drag me down deep into an underworld. At such times, Daddy, Mummy, and Margot leave me cold. I wander from room to another, downstairs and up again, feeling like a songbird whose wings have been clipped, and who is hurling himself in utter darkness against the bars of his cage. Go outside, laugh, take a breath of fresh air. A voice cries within me, but I don't even feel response anymore. I go and lie down on the divan and sleep, to make the time pass more quickly, and the stillness and terrible fear, because there is no way of killing them. Yours, Anne. So here is a graphic organizer if you want to use it. So you can put which perspective you are planning to choose, which character. So maybe you want to pick Mrs. Van Daan or Mr. Van Daan and their argument or the coat. Maybe you want to take their sign, one side or the other. So Mr. Van Daan, like, oh, we need these supplies our uh, for our family to survive right now. Or maybe Mrs. Van Daan, like, oh, we need to keep this money for the war or after the war so we have something decent to wear. So whatever you think that, whatever character. Or maybe going back to the writing desk, maybe from Dussel's point of view of how he did not want to share the desk with Anne. He didn't want to give up time there. Or maybe from Mr. Frank's point of view of how he had to figure out how to play peacemaker between the two and what his thoughts were on the whole situation. So that's up to you. Remember, all you have to do is write one paragraph about that incident from your character's point of view that you choose. Again, you cannot choose Anne, because then your second paragraph, you need to tell us how your journal entry for your character is different from Anne's diary. What's the tone like? Maybe word choice. So it shouldn't be just a few changes from words here and there. It should be a whole rewriting of that event. So here is just to help you out to be ready for Wednesday. Complete lesson 3.04 if you haven't already. Turn in this 3.04 journal entry. So one paragraph for the journal entry, one paragraph for the reflection. You can put them on the same page. And then read to the end of Thursday, February 3rd, 1944, which is about page 150 if you haven't already. The audio link for the YouTube audiobook is on our course announcements page, also in our course materials folder, so you can grab it there if you'd rather listen. But other than that, keep working on anything else that you might be missing from Unit 3, and if you're with us from the beginning of the year, in Unit 1 as well. If you have questions, you can email me. Otherwise, I will see you in class. Have a wonderful day.